Welcome to this video series of interviews from different companies. And in all these series, we are discussing about the interviews and the process, which are either cracked by me or somebody else who wants to stay anonymous. But there is enough proof gathered that this interview is genuine, which I will show you in this video also. And also, there is a note that all the answers discussed here are mostly correct, and I will explain both the perspectives, like what is the actual answer given by the interviewee and what is the most correct answer if that is not correct. And also, if you found that there is another most closest answer to what is discussed in this video, you can mention it in your comment section, and I will take it from there and update in the description section so that everybody else who watches the video, they'll know the updated and correct answers than what is discussed in this video. This is the interview experience of Zitin for the company called HCL, and it went this way. There are 4 rounds. Okay, let me call it as a zeroth round. The zeroth round is nothing but an online test followed by technical and then followed by managerial, and then finally the HR discussion. And this happens to be a walk-in for Zitin, so it's not a scheduled interview that Zitin has experienced. It's a walk-in experience that we are going to see. And according to him, the panels are less and the candidates are too much. So what they have done according to him is, like, once they got their candidates, to eliminate the remaining candidates, they have started giving the complex programs to write for them in the technical interview, and if they are not able to write the program, then they are rejecting the candidate. So that's how you know uh, the interview experience of HCL walk-in according to Zitin. And as you can see, this is the invite that Zitin got for an online test, and it happened at the interview location. And once the people who have cleared this interview, they are selected for the first round, which is technical, and this is face to face. Now we are going to see the first round, which is technical experience of Zitin, and this is for the candidates of 3 to 6 years, and the skill is for automation, Selenium along with Java. This is the first round in the HCL interview process, which is technical round, and this went for 45 minutes, and there are in total 17 questions that are being asked to Zitin. Okay, now let's start with the questions. The first question is, mm, what is static and runtime polymorphism? Right, so to understand this, first we should understand what is polymorphism. So polymorphism is nothing but doing a task in different ways is what is polymorphism. Okay, so actually I tried to explain this with a demo, but while I tried to explain this, it took around 30 minutes just to explain the polymorphism concept and what is runtime and static time polymorphism. So what we do now is, let's just understand this question, and if you wanted to know the detailed explanation, I would say that there is a tutorial which I am preparing for Java Road to Selenium. There we will be talking about polymorphism in details. Here I try to explain the concept with some examples, but I don't want to do it because it itself is taking 20 minutes of time. Okay, so you can refer to this tutorial where the concept of polymorphism is explained clearly. But now let's talk about this question in brief. So what is static and runtime polymorphism? So polymorphism that is resolved during compile time is called as static polymorphism, and polymorphism that is resolved during runtime is dynamic polymorphism. And static polymorphism is achieved by method overloading in Java, and dynamic polymorphism is achieved by method overriding, which happens during runtime. And polymorphism goes along with inheritance concept in Java. Okay, and there is another question which will be followed by this question commonly in many interviews, but in this interview I didn't face it, and that question is, can you do method overloading just by changing the return type? The answer is no, you can't do it, because the compiler will throw an error saying that it's a duplicate method. So you can definitely achieve method overloading by passing different number of parameters. Though the method name is same, if the number of parameters and the type of parameters inside are changed, then it will be treated as entirely a different method. That's why it is possible that you can define different methods with the same name, but still achieve a different result just by passing the different types of parameters and different numbers of parameters, but not just by changing the return type. So that's what method overloading is about. And method overriding is like there is a particular method which you have defined in your child class, okay, and you have anyways have to use this inheritance concept, because this is inevitable in Java when you wanted to achieve reusability of the code. That means the same method would have been there in the parent class also, but it was doing something else in the parent class. So when you wanted to do some task, and that is a repeatable task, but the implementation is going to vary across different child classes, what you do is you create that method in a parent class which is inherited by many other different classes, and you override the method with the code of your choice, and the overriding happens during the runtime, and that way you can execute only that code which is implemented in the child class, though the method is referring to the parent class, right? That's how you can achieve runtime polymorphism. Okay, now let's talk about the second question. The second question is, how do you run a test 10 times in test-ng? So what does it mean? It's the objective here is that interviewer is looking for execution of a test case multiple times, and the common thing that occurs to your mind is using the data provider. So using the data provider, you can pass different sets of data, and the data provider is something which goes in conjunction with the at the rate of test annotation. This means that you are saying that test to be executed those many times which the data provider is passing the data for. That's what you would say, but here the interview here insists that it's not that way. He says that you just have to execute the test case 10 times, that's it, not that you wanted to do it for different sets of data. So how this is done, and that's the exact question, and this is the answer. So like I said, initially I thought he's asking about data provider. That's why I said that you do it with the help of data provider. But to elaborate this question, so there are three ways to achieve the execution 10 times. One is this is the answer exactly actually the interviewer is looking for. So there is this these parameters called invocation count and thread pool size. So you have to pass these arguments inside the test annotation. So what does this mean? So this means that you are saying that this test case to be executed 6 times. So if you wanted to execute it 10 times, you should give 10 over here. And you say that thread pool size is 3, which means that you are running these test cases 3 at a time in parallel, which means there are 3 threads initiated, and each thread is going to take 1 execution at a time. So this way, like, you are invoking a parallel execution, and you are invoking the test case to be run 6 times, and also you are keeping some timeout, which is like this has to be timed out after 1000 milliseconds. Okay, this is how you can execute a test case 10 times in test-ng. Okay, here this is explained, that's all. And if you are looking for to execute the same test with different types of data, like I said, you can achieve it by passing different sets of data. Then you can take help of data provider. And if the objective is just to execute the test case 10 times without having multiple datas, you can do this again by just with the help of a for loop or while loop. Just give a condition that it has to be executed 10 times or how many ever times you wanted to, and you can repeat the loop. But if you explain this answer, what the interview would have asked is how do you execute this test case 10 times and again in parallel. Then definitely you can't do this, because loop means that it will execute one after the other, which takes you back to the first explanation. So this is explanation about this one. And if you are aware of any other way to execute a test case repeatedly 10 times or 6 times or any number of times, please do mention in the comments, then I will update in the description section, so that it will be helpful for anybody else who are referring to this video. Right, now let's talk about third question. So okay, the third question is, when do we use data provider over parameters in TestNG? Okay, answer to this question is, let's try to understand what is parameters annotation and how it is used. So here this is something again we use in TestNG, and okay, this is how we use it. We pass the parameters through TestNG XMLs. So when you wanted to control your execution through TestNG XML, and you want to define something that has to be controlled through the XML, then this is when you use parameter. So here you use here in this example I am using the parameter. I wanted to control the execution for different browsers. So that means I want to control the browser. That's what I want, right? So here I have taken the parameter name browser. I am passing the value Chrome into the parameter with the name browser. So this is how I'm controlling, and I have different choices. So likewise I can create any number of parameters, and inside my TestNG XML I can change the value. The parameter is again something which is defined inside the test in TestNG XML, which means that it will give direction to the test to be executed with this parameter whenever it see the parameter name browser, right? So inside the code you will write at the test annotation to execute the test, and you will use this annotation parameters, and inside it you will pass the parameter name which is browser. So during the runtime what happens is, it reads the value which is passed into the browser. The value is Chrome. So if you wanted to execute this particular test case with Chrome, then inside the TestNG XML you would have given the parameter value for the parameter name browser as Chrome. If you wanted to execute it as with Firefox, you would have given Firefox. That parameter comes all the way through TestNG XML to the particular test case which you are executing, and inside the method this will go to the method, and the same browser goes to the method, and the method in somewhere you will use would have given the direction that okay, launch the WebDriver for Chrome. So that's how, and that's when you use parameter. And what is data provider? So data provider is where you wanted to execute a test case with different types of parameters. And let's talk about again that's entirely a different topic, but here I just wanted to relate in terms of browsers. Okay, so it's like in the above case, when you wanted to execute your test case with Chrome, you would have initiated browser with Chrome once, and the other time you would have to have changed it to the Firefox. That's how I would have done. But for example, if you wanted to execute the test case with different browsers during the runtime, and how would you have achieved this? You can do it with the help of data provider. This is actually not the appropriate example, but I just try to relate with the current context, which is browser, right? So using the data provider, you say that you give the name as browser to the data provider, and inside that you are returning the object. The object is returning 3 different values: Chrome, Firefox, and IE. Now when you execute that particular test case, what it will do is, for the first time it will execute it with Chrome browser, and the next time it is going to execute with Firefox, and the next time it is going to execute it with Internet Explorer. So the same test is executed with different browsers at a time, whereas in case of parameter, if you are trying to take the help of parameter, it's like each time you have to change the value over here. Here you don't have to take the control, like you just run the test case and it will repeatedly run the test case with different sets of values. So to keep it simple, when you wanted to control the execution through XML, then you take the help of parameters, but there is a limitation that you can control only once at a time, where in data provider you can control it through some data which you are providing outside of your test case, any other source with the help of data provider. So that's what's the difference between data provider and parameters, and that's when you use parameters and that's when you use data provider. Okay, now let's talk about the fourth question, which is what is exception handling in Java. So here I have answered that I have used exceptions. I have handled exceptions using try catch block, and also there are different exceptions which are throws. So this is again in detail topic, so this is discussed briefly in the Java Road to Selenium tutorial. You can refer to the section. It will take a lot of time to explain here, but in short, when there is an exception, why do you use exception handling, why you have to handle an exception is when you want your program not to fail and stop the execution at that point. When a certain condition has failed, then you will handle that exception by using try catch block. So it will just handle that exception and it will not let the execution fail, and it will let the execution proceed further to the next line of codes. So that is why you wanted to handle the exception. That is when you handle the exception. Now the other question is, have you used collections in your framework? Then I said that yes, I have used collections in framework, and anybody who works on Selenium automation, they have to use collections. And he just asked me to name some of the collections which I have used. Then I have answered like I have used sets, iterator, queues, and lists, and we have discussed some of the examples. I'm not discussing the examples over here. You can refer to Java Road to Selenium tutorial, which is there in again this YouTube channel. If it is not there now, you say that it is in progress. You will see that later. Okay, now the second question, the other question is the sixth question, which is what is the difference between hash map and hash table. This is the common question which I have seen been asked in many other interviews as well. So what is the difference between hash map and hash table? So hash map is a synchronized collection, and hash table is synchronized. So that's the main difference. And hash map is not thread safe. What is meant by not thread safe? Not thread safe means it is not safe to share between many different threads. That's why I say that it is not thread safe. So without proper synchronization code, you can't share it because it is not thread safe. If it is thread safe, you can easily share it between the threads without having taken care of proper synchronizations. Whereas hash maps are thread safe. Hash tables are thread safe. And hash map allows one null key and multiple null values, whereas hash table doesn't allow any null key or value. Hash map is generally preferred over hash tables if thread synchronization is not needed. Okay, so the interviewer will not just ask about difference between them, and he will ask like when do you use hash map and when do you use hash table. So when do you prefer hash map over hash table, or vice versa, when you prefer hash table versus hash map? So this all depends on the basic definition. So if your code says that thread safety is important, then you go for hash tables because hash tables has thread safety and hash map doesn't have thread safety. And wherein in your coding you don't want to allow any null key or value. There you prefer hash tables because hash table doesn't allow it. But in your coding, there are certain cases where you wanted to handle multiple null values. Then you go for hash map. There you will use hash map. So that's the difference, and that is when you prefer to use what. Okay, and the seventh question is difference between abstract class and interface. All of the methods in the interface are all abstract. So first, okay, let's directly understand. An interface cannot contain instance field. The only field that can appear in interface must be declared both static and final. So if you wanted to declare anything inside an interface, it has to be declared as static and final. And an interface is not extended by class, right? So you can't extend the interface. It is implemented by the class. And an interface can extend multiple interfaces. So this is a sort of multiple inheritance. So you can implement, I would say it's not extend, you can implement multiple interfaces, which means like similar to extension, but wherein you can't do multiple extensions in the case of abstract class. So that is what the main difference. And in abstract class, there is a possibility that there can be both abstract methods and also standalone methods, but whereas everything in interface is abstract, so all the methods are declarative, but the implementation is done only in the during implementation. Okay, so that's the major difference between the abstract class and interfaces. Now let's talk about eighth question. So what is data encapsulation? So unlike abstract and interfaces, encapsulation is a concept, and polymorphism is also a concept in Java. Okay, now what is data encapsulation? So encapsulation is defined as a way of wrapping up the data members into single unit. It is the mechanism that binds together the code and the data that has been used during the execution. The other way, a simple way to think about encapsulation is when you wanted to protect some data, when you want some data to be not accessed by the classes which are outside of that package, what you do is you define the members as protected or private. In that way you can prevent the usage of those members by a different class. But you will have again written some public methods inside that class, with help of which you can actually access the data members of that particular parent class. So this way lead to encapsulating or combining the data which you wanted to handle and the methods which are actually accessing the data members or the variables. So that is called encapsulation of the data and the data members. And encapsulation can be achieved just by declaring all the variables in a class as private and writing some public methods in the class to get or set the values of variables. So you would have heard of getters and setters, right? So when you say that you are implementing getters and setters, that means that you are following the concept of encapsulation over there. And the ninth question is, can we create an object for abstract class? No, you can't create an object for abstract class. And why you can't create an object for abstract class? Because abstraction itself means that you wanted to hide the implementation, right? So when you say that you are hiding, you don't want to expose it. And when you how you can expose anything in Java? With the help of objects, right? So you can access anything with the help of objects. So but wherein abstract means that you wanted to hide something, right? So no one should be able to access that particular thing. That means you shouldn't be able to create an object for that particular class. Only then you can hide it. If you are able to create an object to that class, that means you are not able to hide it, or you are not able to, it is not going to be abstract class. That's why you can't create an object for the abstract class. Okay, but how do you access those members? How do you access those members is you inherit these abstract classes into the child classes where you wanted to inherit, and there you create object for you know those classes, and then you access the members inside the abstract class with the help of the methods which are defined in abstract class once again. So that's how you can access it. Now let's go to 10th question. What is difference between SOAP and REST APIs? Okay, so these are the fundamental difference between SOAP API and REST API. You can still read on the internet for further more differences. So basically SOAP API is a protocol. SOAP is simple object access protocol, and this is the protocol, wherein REST API is, it's not a protocol, it's an architecture. So when certain web service or API is following the fundamental principles or the architecture defined by the REST, then you call it as REST API or REST web service. Okay, and SOAP API is largely based on HTTP and XML, and wherein REST API uses multiple standards. It doesn't stick to XML. It can access XML. It can implement JSON. It can you can access a resource with the help of its URL or URI. Okay, and in SOAP API there are pretty much standards to follow because you are using XML. So there are certain standards that are defined in XML that you have to adhere to, wherein REST API, it is flexible. If you don't want to use XML, you can use JSON, which is pretty simple to understand and to read. There are no standards that needs to be followed. That's why using REST API with the help of JSON format is simple. And since it is used using XML, since it is difficult to understand, obviously it is difficult for developing the XML also for the developers. Wherein REST, it is very simple. You just have to rely on the URL or the resources where you are keeping the information. It will save lot of time in designing the web services of type REST API. Okay, so that's the difference between REST API and the SOAP web services. Now the next question, what is the architecture of Selenium? So you can refer to this blog, 4versatilles.blogspot.com, and I'll just explain this because we have a similar question, which is 14th question, where interviewer has asked how Selenium interacts with the web browser. So both are these discussed in this blog. You can just visit this blog. I'll show you and explain you both of these questions at a time, which is 11 and 14th question. Now the 12th question is, do you know Ready API framework? I don't know about it, so I have answered like I don't know. And the next question is, what is WSDL file? So what is WSDL or WSDL? Right, it is nothing but web service description language. So this is an XML based definition language, and WSDL files are written based on XML, and it is used. So but eventually, what is WSDL file, right? So WSDL file is nothing but it is used for describing the functionality of SOAP based web services. So when you are executing or when you are automating SOAP services, first you will get a WSDL file. There the WSDL file has a definition of the functionality of the web service. With the help you can just mock the web services, or you can copy the web services and do changes to it to achieve or to test different data combinations to validate the response of that particular web service. So WSDL files are central to testing SOAP based services. SOAP UI uses WSDL files to generate test requests, like I said, and you can create a test request from the SOAP API which is inside the WSDL file, and you can add assertions and you can do mocking of the services. Now 14th question, how Selenium interacts with the web browser. Now let's visit the blog, and there we'll discuss about the architecture of Selenium. So you just have to go to this blog. Okay, this is the blog, 4versatilles .blogspot.com, and here you see this interviews question and answers, and it will take to a place where I am keeping all the interviews Here we are talking about HCL interview, right? So go to HCL interviews, click on first round technical. So there you will find same what we are discussing now. Here you will see questions from 1 to 17. Now let's go back to 14th question, so which is how does Selenium interacts with web browser, and 11th question is what is the architecture of Selenium. So both is same. So now let's talk about this. So this is the architecture of Selenium, and also this is how the browser interacts with, Selenium interacts with the browser. So Selenium consists of this core structure. The first one being Selenium client library, second one being JSON wire protocol over HTTP, the third one being browser drivers, and the final one is the actual browser which is launching the application which you wanted to automate. So what is Selenium client library consists of? Selenium client library consists of different libraries which are defined in various languages such as Java, Python, Ruby and C#. So what is library again? Library again is nothing but jar files, and these jar files are having the classes which are used for automation. Okay, so for example, if you have written this code like driver.find elements, so where this methods find element is coming from, the find element method is defined inside these libraries, and these are specific for each different language. So the same find element method is there in Java, the same find element is there defined in Python, Ruby and C#. So that's how that's what the libraries are meant for. So basically, if you wanted to automate something, the methods which are you're using inside Selenium, these are all coming from the libraries which are supplied. So these are part of the Selenium. So this is one of the components, and the second component is JSON wire protocol over HTTP client. So what this is doing, you can read on what this is, and what this is doing is when you do certain action, so when you write this code like driver.find element, okay, let me show it here. So this is the example. So here you have initiated your driver which is of Chrome driver, and you are getting the URL of 4versatiles.blogspot.com. So what exactly happening in this line? So with the help of Selenium client libraries, you are able to write this code, right? You are able to access this .get method, and when you do it, what happens is once you are ready with the script, and when you click on the run button to execute the program based on the above statement, Chrome browser will be launched and it will navigate to the website which is 4versatiles.blogspot.com. So what happens internally when you click on run until it launches the Firefox browser is, once you click on the run, every statement in your script over here, this is converted to a URL with the help of JSON wire protocol. So what JSON wire protocol is doing is it is converting these methods into a URL. When you are talking about URL, again the web service is coming into the picture. So this communication afterwards is going in terms of a web service. Your pack request which is there inside the Java is converted into a simple web service now, which is run over HTTP with the help of HTTP protocol. Now when we are talking about running web service, there the concept comes the concept of client and server, right? Here the client is going to be your drivers and the server is going to be your actual browser, and there are different different drivers for different browsers. So that's how when you wanted to run some tests on Chrome, you are initiating the driver of Chrome. When you wanted to execute your tests on Firefox, you are initiating Firefox related drivers. So these drivers are a sort of clients. So this is a request for Chrome driver which is triggered with the JSON protocol, and this is submitted on the server, and then finally the browser is interacting through the driver and it is responding to the interaction which is given in the code. So that's how the communication goes on. This is how Selenium interacts with the browsers finally. So that's what the explanation about Selenium architecture, or how Selenium interacts with the browser through different web drivers. Okay, now we have discussed till 14 questions. Now let's see question number 15. How do you do parallel testing? Okay, this is important, and there are many ways to execute parallel testing. I have discussed some of the methods, and if there is a different method, you can mention it in the comments, and this can be referred by somebody else who is going through the videos. Okay, the first method is again through testng XML. So you can define the thread count to 3 in the parameter, and then you can invoke 3, which will invoke 3 Java threads at a runtime, and the tests are distributed across the threads, and thus the execution time reduces significantly. And you can run these parallel threads at test level, at method level, and at class level. So this way you can execute parallel, you can achieve parallel execution. So you can achieve parallel execution at test level, method level, and classes level as well. Okay, and this is the concept which in testng. So you can refer to the tutorial which is for testng. There this concept is explained even more detail with the help of demo. For the sake of time, I am not going to explain in detail. This is just about the question and answers which are asked in the interview. So you can read on the session later. And the second method is using Selenium grid concept. So using grid hub concept, so you can define your hub, and you can define the nodes, how many nodes you wanted to, and you can execute them on different nodes. So you can execute parallelly to test cases on different machines which can be operated in the same operating system, and also different operating systems, and you can do the parallel execution. So these are the two ways, and if you have any other way to do parallel testing, you please mention it in the comments. And the 16th question is, without using send keys, how do you type the text in your script? There are again two ways. One is with the help of JavaScript executor. So here you can define an object for this, driver for JavaScript executor. So this is the syntax. So I have initiated this object JS, and I have called this method execute script, and here I am calling get element by ID, and I am passing that ID property over here. This is to recognize that particular web element. There I am calling the value method, and inside the value method I am passing what I wanted to type. So this way, with the help of JavaScript, you can type text in a particular web element. The second method is using the robot class. So you can define an object called a robot for the class robot again, and using that object robot you will have access to the method key press. So what this key press method will do is it will press that particular key. So further you have to pass the parameter which key you wanted to press. So here I am pressing A key. So similarly you can press D, and then you can press M, and then you can press I, you can press N. So this way you can enter text into your particular web element. And these are the two other methods, but the normal method is anyways using the send key, which is there coming with the Selenium library, right? So these are the three ways, and apart from this way, if you know any other way, please do not forget to mention it in the comments. And final question, which is 17th question, what class or library files are used for Excel SX sheets and to handle Excel S sheets? So this is basically to handle different formats of Excel sheets. One is Excel SX extension, and another one is XLS extension. The answer is like there are Apache POI libraries. To read XLS files, you are going to implement HSSF related classes, and to handle Excel SX files, you are going to take the help of POI libraries, which are using this class called XLSX and XSSF. You can refer to relevant videos for demo on this channel. So in the same channel, There are other tutorials for test ng and also Java Road to Selenium. There these concepts are defined even more and simplest way, so please do watch those videos as well. And this is all about HCL first round interview. Thank you for watching this video.
If you like this video, please like it and share it to your friends. Also, if you wanted to see more content like this, please do subscribe to this channel and also spread the word to your friends. And if you miss any of the videos, you can refer to this channel and also you can refer to this blog which is given below, which is forwardstyles.blogspot.com. And also, if you wanted to contribute your knowledge through wider audience, you can join us by writing it to this given email, which is sharetesttube@gmail.com. And also, if you have any doubts on any of the videos, again, you can write to us over sharetesttube@gmail.com. Thank you for watching this video.